I'm delighted to have in studio with us Foreign Affairs Cabinet Secretary Amina Mohammed. Also with us is the Executive Director of UNEP, Achim Steiner. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And we are taking a look at a huge conference that's taking place in Nairobi this week. It's the first session, I understand, of the United Nations Environment Assembly of UNEP. We're told over 170 countries, over 100 ministers, or about 100 ministers, and more than 1,000 participants will be here this week. Let's start with the fact that Kenya has faced quite a bit of security challenges. And we've heard news, Amina, that some development partners are moving out and agencies are moving out and there's a crisis. Is there a crisis, and what is the situation on the ground? Let's start there.
Look, there's no crisis. Absolutely none. If there was, then we would not be at the center of the globe as we are today. We just completed the 99th session of the African, Caribbean and Pacific Council of Ministers meeting in Nairobi. We also had the 39th SCP and EU Council of Ministers meeting here. We had over 100 ministers and assistant ministers and permanent secretaries and ambassadors here. We have the UNEP next week and I think Achim will go into the details of that. The numbers are huge. Over 1,000 delegates, and he'll tell you who's coming and who's not. We have the Commonwealth Electoral Networking meeting that's held every 2 years. We have over 200 participants from 53 countries. At the UN, the numbers are increasing actually.
But let me ask,
we have moved, two organizations have actually moved global offices to Nairobi in the very recent past. One is WHO, which has moved its global security sector section here to Nairobi, and UNAIDS has moved its IT global section to Nairobi.
Well, we're going to come back to the genesis of the feeling that we are being abandoned in just a moment, but let me come to you, Achim, and the importance of this meeting, but also generally the UN presence that's in Kenya. We've had a partnership for a long time, like New York, Geneva. We host quite a number of offices here in Kenya. What is the UN commitment to Kenya, even in the face of the current situation?
Well, I think you've heard many of us speak, including the Director General of the United Nations Office at Nairobi, myself, my colleague Jean-Claude in UN Habitat. And as the Cabinet Secretary just said, the United Nations has built up its presence here over 40 years. In fact, it began with the establishment of UNEP, but today you have a compound in Gigiri that is home to not only UNEP, UN Habitat, the United Nations offices in Nairobi, but indeed 60 or 70 United Nations agencies, funds and programs that have offices here for work in Kenya and regionally. So I think the commitment is clearly evidenced by the growing numbers, and I think our expectation is not to change that, but rather to work with the government, to work with civil society on addressing the issues that sometimes become issues of great concern.
So what are the security arrangements for this? And why do you think there's such a negative perception about Kenya? Even the media saying that, we're facing a crisis in terms of our development partners.
Everybody else doesn't think so. Frankly, everybody else doesn't think that there's a crisis. Do we have a security challenge? Absolutely, we do.
We do.
I mean,
we
absolutely
do.
One.
Right.
In fact, you referred to two. As you started.
Wajir and Peketoni just recently.
So we have a security challenge, right? But you also know that we are a target not because of Kenya. We are a target because there are Western interests in this country. Most of the targets are actually, the drivers actually are Western interests in the country. Some of our early attacks, right, at the US Embassy. Some of the targets that have been identified in the latest alerts and all that, again, embassies, places which are occasioned and visited by expatriates or other. So basically, we are a front line in the global war on terror. We expect understanding, we expect support, we get lots of it, we cooperate with others. With the US Embassy, in the last 3 weeks, I've had 3 meetings with the ambassador, right? Talking about other things, but security as well. The cooperation that we enjoy, the things we are doing together. We went to Boston to commemorate with them the first year anniversary of the bombings of Boston. Why? because we actually trust this relationship, right?
So it's good to hear that we have good relationships actually with our foreign partners in this. A lot of Kenyans don't feel safe, Amina. What's being done when you have meetings like this, but also what's being done for the common mwananchi, for the ordinary Kenyan? What are we doing on security?
Julie, look at the budget. Look at the budget, right? A lot of resources have been allocated, actually, security agencies, to make sure that what was not there, what was lacking, what was inadequate, right, will be provided. A lot of capacity building is taking place. A lot of training is taking place. The numbers are increasing. We are doing everything humanly possible, right, to ensure that we prevent these attacks in the future. Mm-hmm. But I can't sit here and give you 100% guarantees. Nobody can. Even countries with the most sophisticated technologies and systems cannot do that, right? But we can do whatever it takes to make sure that we protect our citizens and our properties, right? Make sure that we don't leave anything, any stone unturned when these crimes occur, that we go after the perpetrators, that we try and prevent any future attacks.
Let me come to you, Achim. And our coastal cities, our coastal towns are feeling the impact of tourism that has withdrawn. It's great to see the support and continuing support of the United Nations bodies. Do you continue to support Kenya because you believe that the government has the capacity to handle the security situation? And what support are you giving? There's a diplomatic police corps. So what support are you giving that informs the position that you've taken as the UN to stay with Kenya on this journey?
Well, first of all, in troubled times, you don't leave friends. Kenya has been a great friend to the United Nations when it offered to host the first United Nations program in the world, in the developing country universe at the time in 1972. That was a major breakthrough for the United Nations, and that is why we have developed over these years, which have not always been easy, let's be honest. There have been periods that in the past also have been challenging. Our primary interest is not to leave. It is actually to do everything to stay in a country. This is as true in the humanitarian context, where we're often the first to arrive after a disaster, and we try to be the last possible ones to leave when it becomes impossible to work. Now, for a headquarters such as UNEP or UN Habitat, obviously this is not humanitarian work. We have our world headquarters here. We bring top scientists, top managers, top economists from around the world to work here. And obviously our interest is to make their life as comfortable and secure as possible in order to be able to operate what is a world headquarters here in Nairobi. And I think what is the interest of the Secretary General and of all of us in the United Nations is to build on this relationship to make Nairobi thrive. But as the Cabinet Secretary has said, there are challenges. These challenges need to be addressed. We try to work with government. We have in the past, for example, an issue such as street lighting. It was my predecessor, I'm told, Klaus Töpfer, who at the time with the government put the idea forward that crime goes down where you put street lighting. And many other such examples are there with the diplomatic police unit. But let's be honest, there are too many people being killed as a result of crime and affected. And that is something that the government has expressed time and again is a priority. It cannot change overnight, but it must change as much for the interest of keeping international organizations here as for every Kenyan. Because let's be honest, it's actually Kenyan citizens who are on the front line of crime, and we get affected in a sense as well.
Right.
Let me also say that with the UN, we have our host country meetings, and we held the last one on the 18th of June. We hold them periodically, and at that meeting, we were informed actually that in the last 6 weeks there haven't been any serious incidents of crime that have been committed against UN staff. And I think it's also because we have tried to make sure that we listen to the concerns that are raised, and we try and upgrade the level of security that's provided.
That's a great thing, and to be escalated to the Mwananchi as well, and hopefully something that we'll see in all our different respective areas and across the country.
Sometimes for people who live in Nairobi, Gigiri, the red number plates, I know it is a very distant world, but actually we have succeeded with one another over time, and very often things that we can bring to the city are also benefits that will hopefully help everybody in the city and vice versa. So I think that symbiosis is really why we are so strong about not talking about packing, but rather talking about how to help solve the problems and also calling for more action.
Right, so how to work together to address insecurity and also push the government on the issue. Let's go to the conference this week. What are we expecting as we wind up the interview? What are we hoping to see this week? A lot of activity, 1,200 to 1,300 delegates?
Yes, and they're already at work, and what we are seeing once again this week is history being made right here in what we often call the environmental capital of the world. Close to 170 countries.
Can we say that again? Nairobi is called the environmental capital of the world?
Well, first of all, you know, many in Kenya and many who live in Nairobi often forget that this is one of the greenest capital cities. And let me say right here and now, I hope it will stay that way, because every day that passes, that is changing. And to my regret, I think, and to those such as Wangari Maathai and many who fought for the green areas and spaces in Nairobi, don't give them up. You have one of the most beautiful capital cities, but if you build every square meter with buildings and roads, you will no longer have that. But it's also the environmental capital, because not only do we have the history of UNEP here, which was really the beginning of the international environmental community, you have many of the international research centers that work here. CIFO, the World Agroforestry Center. You have the headquarters for the regions of IUCN and WWF. So there is actually a critical mass of institutions who are operating from here. But this week, it truly is the environmental capital, because virtually 90% of all member states of the UN General Assembly will be here in Nairobi to mark a milestone in the history of the environment, which is a new United Nations Environment Assembly, bringing the world together. And I know to some it will just seem like a conference, but it is not. There are 16 major decisions and resolutions on the table, from chemicals to air pollution to the illegal trade in wildlife. Maybe we'll come back to that. Many important decisions that we are part of helping the world come together to address.
Happy to see wildlife on the agenda just as we close. Amina, please.
Absolutely, very, very happy. You know, 3 years ago, when we actually were preparing to go to Rio, because we went to Rio 2 years ago.
Before I lost it to the government of Kenya.
You know, seriously, I mean, we all, of course, were hoping that this would happen, and we worked really, really, really hard. I must really thank Achim Steiner for that. Worked really hard to get to this level where we actually upgrade the governing council to an assembly, an environment assembly. And you know, one of the reasons I think that we're able to do that was that, you know, Nairobi was still considered by many to be the home of the environment. It started here many, many years ago, as Achim has said, but also Kenya has put green energy actually on the world map, so to speak, because we have, you know, we've gone green, geothermal, wind, solar. We're the leaders right now, you know.
And people are surprised to hear that. I'm going to have to stop because of time, but we have the whole week with you, literally, as the conference is ongoing, and I think we'll be updating on different issues throughout the course of the week. I want to thank you both for coming in. You might be asking, why is this conference important to me? Why do I care? It's important for many reasons, including the fact that it brings visitors to Kenya, it renews confidence in our country, it brings money, puts money on the tables of many of us in the cities, and we're hoping to see the tourism back as well, as Kenya tries to deal with the situations that it faces. But do share your views with us. 22422. How do we renew confidence in the country, even as we see the conferences ongoing? How do we get the tourism back in as well? We wish you all the best, and we'll be seeing you in the course of the week as well. Now,